morning. When I chose the topic, the magic of new beginnings, as our January theme, I didn't realize that yesterday, January 25th, launched the Lunar or Chinese New Year, and 2020 is the year of the rat, which is the year of new beginnings. So that's what we have. So something knew that when I didn't. And if you read the e-news, you know that the rat is the first of all the zodiac animals. According to one of the myths, the Jade Emperor said that the order of the zodiac would be determined by the order in which the animals arrived at his party. And the rat tricked the ox into giving him a ride. And then just as they arrived at the finish line, he jumped down and landed ahead of ox, becoming first. So that's how he got his position. Yeah, and probably you're like me. I see rats as repulsive creatures. But in the Oriental cultures, rats are seen as a sign of wealth and surplus. In fact, the people who own the nail place that I go to get my nails done, they're blue this year. They're Vietnamese. And yesterday, when I was having my nails done, they came dressed in these really bright yellow and red. And they just looked beautiful, and it was all to celebrate the Chinese New Year. Well, I stole my topic for today, jump time, from Jean Houston's book of the same name. And she defines jump time as a whole system transition, a condition of interactive changes that affects every aspect of life as we know it. And even though this book was written over 10 years ago, I believe that today we are smack dab in the middle of jump time. Radical changes are happening at a rapid and global pace. Think about it. In just one lifetime, we've gone from manual typewriters to computers that fit in a pocket. How many of you remember the huge advance that came with the Selectric typewriter? Not only had it gone from manual to electric, but now you could purchase 2 or 3 type balls and change fonts. That was big. Whiteout was big. So from the manual typewriter to an electric one, that's an advance. From electric typewriter to computer, that's a jump. In just one lifetime, we've gone from listening to programs on the radio to being awed by seeing black and white reflections on a tiny screen in a huge box filled with tubes. That's an advance. But from there, we've jumped to satellite color television with hundreds of channels at our fingertips and the ability to record and watch programs at our convenience. In just one lifetime, we've gone from being very local, knowing about our own little corner of the neighborhood with a bit of news from other places, to being hugely connected to what is going on in every area of the world. Ruth and I connect on WhatsApp, from Ecuador. Wow. So with a few clicks, we're on the internet. We have the ability to connect with just about everybody on the planet. In just one lifetime, we've seen the rise of computers from the big, huge machines that filled up a room or two, used only by the biggest companies or government, to an age where Google is a verb. Just a little over 100 years ago, the Wright brothers proved that we could fly. And that technology has led us to global transportation. It's led us to the moon, and now we look at the stars. Science, too, has made the jump from Newtonian physics to quantum physics. We no longer see the makeup of our world in terms of molecules or atoms, but as energy, like Deepak Chopra calls us, energy and information. And these shifts are not merely changes or advances. They're jumps. We used to call them paradigm shifts. Radical changes in personal beliefs, complex systems, or organizations, replacing the former way of thinking or organizing with a radically different way of thinking or organizing. Very much the definition that G uses for jump time. And today we see some of the negative effects of jump time. We see the devastating effects of climate change. We see the building of nuclear proliferation again. There are old ways of government are cracking, not just in our country, but around the world. Look at Brexit. And in some way, each one of us are affected by these jumps, these paradigm shifts. And I think sometimes we're overwhelmed by them. Either consciously, as we see the changes about us, or unconsciously, as we feel the uncertainty of living in this speeded up world. Yet the beauty of our lives is that we are always at choice points. We can choose to see ourselves as victims in a world of chaos. That's kind of like I am with my smartphone. Or we can choose to see that we are part of a new world and we have a rather large hand in the reshaping of it. Because not only are we in jump time, we are in spiritual jump time. And most of us that are here in this room or that are studying metaphysics have found that old-time religion doesn't work anymore. So we need a spirituality that is usable, that makes sense, that calls forth something within us that meets our needs at the deepest level. We're not content with Christianity as the only one true religion. We seek spiritual understanding from the wisdom of the ages, from the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, the Tao Te Ching, the Native American traditions, other indigenous cultures. And it's a natural part of most spiritual practices and in many medical parts of our world to incorporate the Eastern practice of meditation as a means to calm our body and our mind. So I think we have either a firm knowing or an inner urging that it is our spiritual quest, our connection with our source, that will balance or counteract the uncertainty of jump time in the material world. As we see ourselves immersed in this cosmic ocean of divine creativity and divine presence, we don't need to be apprehensive of change. We can play in jump time. We can be willing to say yes to the possibilities, grateful to be alive. Jean Houston gives 5 spiritual practices that will guide us in this renaissance of spiritual evolution. And they are tell the new story, commune with beauty, decondition old habit patterns, enter the silence or celebrate the fullness, and find a supportive community. So tell the new story. I find it interesting that that's Jean's first suggestion, because the Judeo-Christian story begins with a God that created all things as good and very good. Then God creates man and woman, puts them as little innocent children in a garden, shows them an apple tree, and tells them not to eat of it. And of course they do, and they're thrown out of the garden as punishment for their sin, and all their offspring are born from that sin. That's a story that needs to go. While there are still many religions that believe that we're born in sin, I believe our new story needs to state categorically that we are born in love. If God is good and very good, God made all things good and very good, then that's us. That's us. In her book, Jean Houston tells a new story, and it's really lengthy, but it begins with a garden in which a cosmic tree of infinite possibilities is planted. And as it grows, each bud is a part of the new creation, yet it's all linked to the same tree. As humans come on the scene, they begin to see that all of the wonders of the world are linked back to that tree. And they begin to see that all life is engaged in a process of continuous creation, and that they too are both participants and creators in this life. That's the story we need to be telling. We're not born in sin. We are born out of love. We are that love in action. And in that new story, alienation is replaced with connection. Loneliness with an expansive and intimate sense of family, life-destroying materialism with a spiritual and humane agenda. So you and I, we stand at this precipice. We stand as tellers of this new story. And in our new story, we are part of a larger whole, and we have, through our own creativity, which is our use of infinite creativity, all that we need to tend our own cosmic tree. She says, commune with beauty wherever you find it. Spend more time exploring and celebrating the human glories of literature, art, music, dance, theater, and the simple wonders of the natural world. She says, immersion into beauty wherever you find it calls forth inner beauties and brings to consciousness the budding of new realities and the freshness of a world made new. Artists catch the currents of the universe and put them into forms that call our emergent selves to heightened awareness. Art makes perception more acute and conception as well. It shakes the mind from its solid moorings so that you see deeper into the world. And they help us find beauty in the midst of chaos. You know, in the 1960s, artist and nun, Sister Corita Kent, was head of the art department at Immaculate Heart College in Los Angeles. She would take her students to places like grocery stores, car washes, and say to them, look at this, and look again, and see anew. And there is beauty within everything if you focus on it, and that's what her students learn to see and to paint. And one time, after Sister Corita had retired, the administration of Immaculate Heart called her and said, we've had a fire in the auditorium. There are burned spaces everywhere, and we're holding a symposium next week. What can we do? And she said, I just love burned out spaces. And I learned about that because the story was told to me. I was in attendance at that symposium. And what happened is in every place that there was a burned out space, there was a huge flower arrangement in front of it. So that burned out space became the backdrop of the flowers. They worked together and they were beautiful together. Communing with beauty can be about music, poetry, literature, dance, art, and all of that makes our own perception more acute. It can be active appreciation of nature, to see in the mountain, Grandfather Mountain, and to be aware of all the memories that have passed beneath him. To see in a single rose the billion-year story that has gone into its making. 3 is decondition old habit patterns which keep us stuck in the illusion of separation. Jean says, whether our particular non-virtue is gossip or anger, self-depreciation or toxic thinking, social or business practices that hurt the souls of others, jump-time spirituality has many methods for bringing such behaviors to consciousness so that they can be replaced by self-nurturing and compassionate ways of being. From the Eastern mindset, there is a way where we just simply are mindful, just being aware of the arising and passing of thoughts. Just being aware of it, because as we become aware of it, we widen that gap between self and behavior, and stimulus and response, so that to provide for a time of choice. Other schools of spiritual psychology, and we certainly do this, we encourage stopping ourselves when we're about to engage in a negative habit and say stop. I had a friend that said erase, now we go delete. Wayne Dyer would say next. But what happens with repeated practice, we learn to self-orchestrate the mind and its callings with greater skill. Jean said that one way to decondition old habits is through acts of public service, restorative justice, volunteerism, and philanthropy, acts of kindness on a planetary scale. Because when we take compassionate action, we transcend dualism and come to know the richness and complexities of others. She says, compassionate service engenders passionate concern and sets the life force to flow more strongly in our blood. Number 4 is enter the silence or celebrate the fullness by making time for practice of spiritual connection. This can be seen as the way in or the way out. Through the way in, we enter the silence through meditation and prayer, retreating from the circumference to the world to go into our own center and that mystical connection we have with Spirit. And Jean calls this clearing the muchness to get to the suchness. I like that. The way out is the path that takes us out into the world to experience its fullness in joy, and that path, I believe, has gratitude at its base. So often we take the small blessings of our life for granted. And Marcia Sutton, in the Financial Freedom Materials, writes, whatever we take for granted, we lose. She says that taking things for granted is a form of ingratitude. So gratitude puts our blessings right before our eyes, whether it's the small blessing of a bird song or the huge blessing of a physical healing. We celebrate the fullness of life when we stand in awe and appreciation of it. And finally, to find a community to support your spiritual practice. And obviously, that's why we're here. That's why we're here. We don't come just for the message or just for the music. We come to be in a room of people of like mind, to share our joys, our sorrows, our trials, our rewards, everything together from that space of understanding and knowing that this is love in action. And we have things like our spiritual circle, which deepens that, as well as our men's. One of the things I love about our men's breakfast is that here are men who are willing and able and enjoying being vulnerable together. And I think that it's something that doesn't happen in that outside world very often. The Buddhists call the spiritual community that is deeply committed to its teachings a sangha. And they say that without the support of a sangha, the spiritual path can be lonely and difficult. And I believe that that's what we have here. We have a sangha. We've created a space where we can deepen our spirituality together, we can nurture ourselves, and support and encourage each other. What I think is that the jump time of radical change that we find ourselves in calls for a radical jump time spirituality. The more we understand our inner life and our connection to the One, the more we are called to act more wisely in the world. We can no longer use our spirituality for our own benefit alone, an inner experience that gives us a feeling of peace and separates us from the material world. But rather, our spirituality is also the call to action, to use what we know in conscious service to the needs of the world. It's the call to oneness, to accountability and mutual support, not just in our heads, but in our hearts. Not just in our hearts, but in our actions. It's the call to show up as our authentic selves with our natural compassion, empathy, and open-heartedness. We don't have to fear or be wary of this radical jump time. I think that we're here to embrace it, to step into it with our love, and in so doing, transform that chaos into harmony. We are here to be agents of higher consciousness. We are here, as Gandhi says, to be the change we want to see in the world. Thank you. Namaste. Thank you.